Hello, welcome to another episode of R2 Military Channel. And today's theme is Wagner Group versus Russia. Understand the rebellion. After the death of Prigozhin and his partner Dmitry Yakin, several angry messages began to go viral on the web calling for revenge and threatening the start of an armed rebellion against the Russian government. President Vladimir Putin is the main suspect of planning an alleged attack against Prigozhin and other mercenaries that resulted in a fatal plane crash and thus killing the group's main leaders. This drastically revolted the remnants of the group, and the most radical even threatened the start of a new armed conflict. But how seriously can these threats be taken? What is the current strength of the Wagner Group? So let's go. At the height of its strength, between February and May 2023, the Wagner Group was made up of around 75,000 fighters, including 25,000 elite soldiers, very well trained, armed, and with very high salaries. And the remaining 50,000 were made up of a large number of prisoners, recruited by Prigozhin with very little military training and lacking basic equipment such as vests and helmets. In addition, they were extremely poorly paid, and their biggest motivation was the hope of extinguishing their penalties after the end of the war. In May 2023, after conquering the ruins of Bakhmut, Prigozhin stated that he lost around 20,000 fighters in around 10 months of war, confirming then that this was one of the bloodiest and most costly battles on Ukrainian territory, and also confirming the usefulness of its mercenary army on the front line, bringing important victories to the Russians. After the conquest of the city of Bakhmut, most of the prisoners returned to Russia with Prigozhin, leaving around 25,000 fighters, who were distributed to some African countries and some places in Russia. But how did the mercenaries start to turn against the Russian army? This did not happen overnight. Prigozhin gradually demonstrated his great dissatisfaction with the situation of the war, and constantly threatened to leave the fight in Ukraine due to the conditions in which his soldiers were, often without food, water, ammunition, and without the necessary logistical support to remain in such an exhausting and long-lasting battle as that in Ukraine. Prigozhin accused General Sergei Shoigu of being mainly responsible for the boycott of the Wagner Group, as they were increasingly gaining prominence, and Prigozhin, even though he was not an official member of the Russian government, had an increasing popularity and was becoming more and more achievements on the battlefield, thus generating envy on the part of some high-ranking commanders in the Russian army. Tensions were increasing more and more, and after the end of the Bakhmut conflict, which resulted in the death of thousands of soldiers from the Wagner Group, during the way back home, Prigozhin accused Russia of having left several landmines planted on the way back, thus causing the death of several soldiers from the Wagner Group and enraging Prigozhin. The trigger for the beginning of the revolt happened on June 23rd, where Prigozhin claimed that his mercenary camp was attacked by missiles by Russia's own defense ministry, resulting in the death of some soldiers from the Wagner Group. This happened, according to reports, due to the great prominence that the Wagner Group was receiving in the war, and with Prigozhin's popularity increasing more and more. Russia strongly denied the accusations and said that Prigozhin only wanted to attract attention and cause discord in his army. During the night of the 23rd, Prigozhin released an audio in which he informed that he would be marching with his troops towards Rostov and asked that the Russian defense forces not oppose his army. Soon after, on June 24, Prigozhin stated that his soldiers had shot down a Russian military helicopter in self-defense as it attacked his group of soldiers. Russia accused the mercenaries of an attempted military coup, and Prigozhin responded by saying that it was a march for justice. Prigozhin was charged with the crime of armed rebellion while marching with his troops towards the Rostov Oblast. Rostov Oblast was easily conquered by mercenaries, as there was no resistance from Russian soldiers, who even showed some dissatisfaction with the current military command and decided to lay down their weapons to avoid bloodshed. The city was fortified and the defenses reinforced. Prigozhin and his men, fearing some retaliation from the Russian defense forces, surrounded the city with landmines, and in the meantime, his troops continued advancing towards Moscow. Several images were linked on social media showing the Wagner group fighting in Voronezh. According to reports, the Wagner group took control of all military installations in the city. Meanwhile, the mayor of Moscow adopted a state of emergency and took any terrorism measures in the capital. According to the plane tracking website Flight Radar, a flight of Vladimir Putin's plane was detected leaving the city of Moscow and heading to St. Petersburg, possibly out of fear of being captured. Russia denied it and said that Putin was not on that flight. Tensions were high in Moscow, and many police stations were under threat of bombs, claimed by people who said they belonged to the Wagner group. The city's mayor announced that on the 26th there would be no working hours for anyone except the Russian military, and the civilian population was instructed to remain indoors. With the news of the rebellion spreading around the world, everyone was waiting for possible news of the invasion of Moscow, which never actually occurred. The president of Belarus, Lukashenko, met with Prigozhin on June 24th at the request of Vladimir Putin to put an end to the rebellion and bring tranquility to the residents of Moscow. During the talks, it was agreed that Russia would forget the accusations against Prigozhin and that they should leave the country. Prigozhin accepted the agreement, claiming that he wanted to avoid bloodshed within Russian territory, and immediately ordered the halt of the advance of his troops, and thus the rebellion came to an end. Prigozhin was exiled to Belarus. The military was distributed in different places, and from then on the Wagner group began to be dismantled. On August 23, Prigozhin and 9 other people mysteriously died in a plane crash while traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg. From then on, a group on social media formed by members of the Wagner group stated that Prigozhin and his allies had been victimized by Russian anti-aircraft defense and that this was an accident ordered by President Vladimir Putin as revenge for the betrayal. After that, several threats emerged from the Wagner group, which promised revenge sooner or later. But so far nothing has been done, and it is unlikely that they will do anything because the group's main mentors had already been murdered, and to maintain a war against a country like Russia they would need a lot of financial resources and military support from other countries, which is extremely unlikely. In your opinion, what would have happened if Prigozhin had continued with advance? Did Prigozhin give up knowing his inevitable defeat? Or was he not yet ready to become a Russian revolutionary? Would they be able to capture Moscow? Would other military forces and the population join them? This is something we will never know, but this was indeed a historic event and will forever be remembered as an almost. If you liked this video, subscribe to the channel and leave a like so you don't miss out on news from the military world.